These missing person cases and unsolved crimes all seem relatively straightforward at first. Most mysteries of this kind are, which is why they're solved quickly. But the twists and turns in these cases have meant that investigators are still puzzled about what really happened, and the truth remains unknown. Number 5. The disappearance of Barry Botchitz is a strange missing person case, made even stranger by a lack of information from the police. There are many pieces to this puzzle, but not all of them seem to fit together, and many appear to be missing entirely. Barry was a 65-year-old crime defense lawyer living in Antioch, Illinois. He had been in the business for a long time and had many happy clients. His company was listed among the best in the area, and many clients noted that he had been recommended to them. Barry's work involved everything from defending people who earned driving tickets to more serious crimes, including violent criminals. While most were generally happy with his work, there were a few unhappy customers, but that could be expected from all work. In terms of his private life, Barry had been married and had a son with his wife, but the couple had separated years earlier. They were still on good terms though, and Barry often stayed with his wife Betta in Deerfield. It was here where the day of March 24th, 2020 started. It should have been a typical work day. He told his wife about going to work and would see a client later that day. He left the house at about 7 a.m. and drove to Waukegan, where the office he shared with his partner was located. Barry and Betta spoke via various text messages throughout the day, and she didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. At noon, he messaged to say that he was doing some continuing education at his office. Then at 2, he told her he was with a client. The next message didn't come through until 11 p.m. At that point, he told Betta he had finished up for the day, but he was going to spend the night up north. He wouldn't be coming back to Deerfield that night, but it's not clear if he meant he would be spending the night in the office or at his place in Antioch. Whichever it was, this upset Betta. She wanted to know why he wasn't coming home. At first, he said he would explain in the morning, but she persisted. He then told her he thought he had the virus and wanted to stay away from her so that she wouldn't catch it. At the time, information about the coronavirus was still fairly uncertain. At his age, Barry would have been considered at risk, and it would make sense that he didn't want to pass on anything to his wife. The couple continued to communicate through text messages for a while, before Barry said goodnight and turned off his phone, and this was the last communication anyone had with Barry. The next morning, Betta didn't hear from Barry, and he didn't return to her home in Deerfield. She was immediately worried. Given his line of work, Betta knew Barry interacted with some unsavory people, and she believed that might have led to something happening to him. She contacted Barry's business partner, who was at the office. Barry wasn't there, and his partner had not seen or heard from him that day. There was nothing out of the ordinary at the office. Everything seemed to be in its place, and it was exactly how the partner would have expected to find it when he walked in that morning. The only unusual thing that was found in the office was Barry's work diary. He had no meetings with clients scheduled for the day that he disappeared. The police were informed of Barry's disappearance, and he was reported missing. A few days later, Barry's car was located. The 2015 Chevrolet Tahoe was parked on a side street about 2 miles from Barry's law office. Like the office, nothing seemed to be unusual about the car itself, other than where it was parked. There was no sign of any struggle or foul play at the location or in the car itself. There were also no cameras in the area, so it was impossible for police to determine who had parked the vehicle there. All they knew was that it had been there for a few days. As police began to investigate the case, they came across a few strange aspects of Barry's life. According to neighbors, Barry had been moving some of his belongings into a friend's house for storage. The neighbors also said that he found it strange that Barry's trailer was parked outside his house, but his truck was missing. Clearly, it was unusual for him to separate the two, and why he chose to do so on that day remains a mystery. But even stranger was the conversations Barry had allegedly had with friends. The exact details of these conversations have never been revealed, but friends told police that these conversations were concerning. They believed that Barry was in danger from someone. Again, details of who or even why they believed this have not been revealed. There have been few details released in this case, and that's led to more rumors emerging. According to Barry's friends and family, he had no problems with alcohol or illegal substances, but that hasn't stopped rumors from suggesting that his disappearance may have been connected to one of these. He may have also been suffering from mental health problems or burnout. In September, a few months after Barry disappeared, the FBI joined the investigation to provide technical assistance. Generally, the FBI doesn't get involved with missing person cases unless it's believed that foul play was involved. But by 2022, the FBI were no longer working on the case. The agency remained available for assistance, though. It seemed unlikely that a disgruntled client is behind the disappearance, as has been suggested. It's generally uncommon for that kind of thing to happen, but not completely unheard of. Barry did have unhappy clients, and the families or friends of those clients may have decided to take revenge. But no names have ever been suggested as somebody that police should investigate. If there were any major upsets, these weren't well known before Barry disappeared. Whatever happened to Barry, it would appear that he knew something unusual was going to happen on the day of his disappearance. He was going to see a client, even though there was no meeting in his diary. He doesn't appear to have told anyone who that client was, but spent a considerable amount of time with them. Whether he intended to come back after this strange meeting, or if the disappearance was part of Barry's plan when he left home that morning, is just one of many mysteries in this case that remains unsolved. It's likely that the police know more about this case than has been made public. This isn't uncommon and helps the police determine whether new witnesses are telling the truth or just repeating what they've heard on the news. But what's been made public is concerning. Not long after Barry disappeared, a sheriff's office spokesman told local newspapers that there were unusual characteristics in this case. Later, the spokesperson claimed that over 200 leads have been investigated so far, including a portion that was reported from the community. In 2022, there were still several leads being investigated, but no details were revealed. All the spokesperson said was that the case had taken many twists and turns. The case is still active, and police continue to appeal for information or tips that could explain this case. Barry is described as 5'8" and weighing 190 pounds. He had brown hair and hazel eyes, and was last seen wearing blue jeans and a black hooded sweatshirt with red lettering. Anyone with information on the case can contact the Lake County Sheriff's Office at 847-549-5200. Number 4. For 27 years, the friends and family of Ila Hagner had been searching for answers to the strange disappearance of their missing loved one. Earlier this year, an update in the case added a new twist, but no new answers. Ila was an outgoing, enthusiastic 42-year-old living in the Bay Area of San Francisco. She had moved to the US from Sweden a little over 10 years earlier and settled in well. She liked to host dinner parties and had a large circle of friends. Her love life was less than perfect. Ila had an ex-husband and several ex-boyfriends. By 1996, she was dating a hobby astronomer named Thomas Pressburger and seemed to be happy in that relationship. By this point, she had a job at Ixos Software where she worked as a manager. Ila was known as reliable and wouldn't fail to show up without warning. She also had recently started taking night classes at Stanford University, where she was studying for a master's in liberal arts. Her new course mates remembered her as someone who could hardly contain her enthusiasm. She was excited to be there and showed up to the first 2 weeks of classes without issue. But by the third week, she had suddenly stopped showing up. She had vanished without a trace. The last time anybody saw Ila was on the evening of October 14th, 1996. It was a Monday. Ila had spent the weekend on a trip with Pressburger, who took her stargazing. Earlier in the day, there was a work party, so Ila was staying late to finish her work. An executive at the company noticed Ila as she was leaving. She was still finishing up work. When Ilva's coworkers showed up for work the next day, Ilva's workstation was in an unusual state. She would normally turn off her computer and clean her station, but that morning the computer was on and paper was strewn about her desk. Her boss remarked that it was very unlike Ila. She didn't show up for work that day or the next. Her roommates also hadn't seen her. Ylva was reported missing a few days after she was last seen. On October 17th, her car was found. The black Honda Civic was parked in front of the Days Inn Motel, a mile and a half away from the office where Ylva worked. It was unlocked and the keys were in the ignition, but Ylva's purse was missing. There was no sign of a struggle around the car or in the office. The workstation was in a strange state, but it looked more like she had simply left and planned to be back soon, rather than someone had taken her against her will. What makes matters even stranger is that the office was just down the hall from the Belmont Police Department's administrative offices. There were still people working in the building at the time, and if there had been some kind of violent confrontation, they would have heard it. The police and Ylva's family believed that someone who knew her was responsible for Ylva's disappearance. The likely series of events is that someone came to Ylva's office when she was alone and asked her to go with them for some unknown reason. Ylva left her desk and left the building with this unknown individual. They may have gotten into Ylva's car or gone to another location where Ylva sadly lost her life. Ylva's family flew over from Sweden to help with the investigation. They had their theory about the person responsible. As well as studying at a university, Ylva was also friends with many university professors, especially those involved in computer science. According to Ylva's family, one of these professors wasn't happy just being friends with her. This man, known only as the professor, sent Ylva long and disturbing emails. He seemed to be under the impression that they were dating and accused her of being unfaithful. Ylva also confided in friends that he was pressuring her into moving in with him, getting married, and making their relationship more physical. She told a work friend that he would often harass her by phone, hanging up as soon as she answered. Ylva's family believe he was the person responsible for Ylva's disappearance. He was questioned by the police, along with Ylva's ex-boyfriend's ex-husband and her current boyfriend. According to Ylva's family, the professor took a polygraph test, which indicated that he lied when he answered the questions, "Did you cause her disappearance?" and "Do you know where Ylva is now?" That wasn't enough evidence for police to arrest him, though. Lie detectors aren't always reliable, and there could be other reasons he failed this test. The professor also conducted his own search for Ylva, believing she'd some kind of mental breakdown and may have forgotten who she was. He searched among the homeless community but found no answers there. He wasn't the only person who police investigated. 5 months after Ylva disappeared, the focus of the investigation turned to Pressburger, the boyfriend. He owned 3 rural properties that were not occupied. The police searched the sites with infrared scanners and police dogs but found no sign of Ylva. Gradually, the case went cold. No evidence had been found at the office or on Ylva's car that could help police solve the mystery. Ylva's family believed she wouldn't have disappeared by herself and soon came to the conclusion that she was no longer alive. Ylva's case remained a mystery for decades. Occasionally, her story would appear in local media, but after the initial flurry of attention, there was little focus on her case. Few clues came in, and after police had followed all the leads they had, there was not much more they could do. Sadly, Ylva's father passed away without ever discovering what happened to her. But in May of 2023, there was a new twist in the case. For some reason, the police decided to search 2 areas in connection with Ylva's case. It's not known what clue or tip led them here. The first was Stolsoft Park in Redwood City, which was closed off for the search. The second location was a home owned by Thomas Pressburger, which is located next to the park. By this time, Pressburger had gone from being an amateur astronomer to working as a computer scientist at NASA. Pressburger had owned the house since early 1996. It's not clear if this was one of the buildings that were searched during the initial investigation, or if Pressburger was actually living there when the search took place. Local news outlets described the back patio being pulled up as police conducted their investigation, but it wasn't clear if they took anything away from the properties. There was no immediate announcement of any findings, and it doesn't appear that the police found Ylva's remains. Whether they found anything that would lead to answers in this case remains to be seen. There are no suspects in this case, and the lack of any forensic evidence from the office or Ylva's car makes solving the case that much harder. What the search did do was put Ylva's case back in the spotlight. Ila was full of enthusiasm and life when she disappeared. She left behind many close friends as well as her family, who've had to go on for decades without knowing what happened to her. But hopefully this update will convince someone with those answers to come forward. Ila is described as 5'5" and weighing 110 pounds. She had long red hair and blue eyes. Her car was a black 1992 Honda Civic with license plate number 2BB-S966. Anyone with information on this case can contact the Belmont Police Department at 650-595-7400. Number 3. In March of 1996, a shopkeeper became concerned when he hadn't seen a regular customer for a while. He requested a welfare check. When police went to check on Surinder Variapraj, they uncovered a disturbing crime that remains unsolved to this day. Surinder lived in the Handsworth area of Birmingham, England. She was a 36-year-old mother of 3, but all 3 of her children lived with their father. Not a lot of information has been made public about Surinder's life, such as whether she still got along with her ex-husband, or if it was unusual for her children to go without seeing her for over a month. What was made public was the fact that Surinder had suffered from some kind of mental health problem in the past, and would talk to herself. That didn't stop her from living an ordinary life though, and she was well known in the local area. She would regularly come into local stores to do her grocery shopping. She was unemployed and would sign on at the job center to get job seekers allowance and to search for employment. The last time she visited the job center was on January 4th, 1996. Typically, someone would have to visit the job center once every 2 weeks and meet up with a job coach, but Surinder would never go back. This alone wouldn't be too strange, but there seemed to be something going on in Surinder's life. A few weeks later, neighbors noticed that windows on her property had been broken, and a chair was placed beneath the bathroom window. By this point, the extreme cold of December had been replaced with some milder weather, but it was still much too cold to have broken windows that weren't dealt with. This would have been made much worse when the end of January came and the cold weather returned. By the start of February, snow was falling again. Surinder was seen on February 4th clearing snow from the lane behind her home. That would be the last time Surinder was seen alive. At about midnight on February 5th, neighbors heard strange banging noises coming from the row of houses where Surinder lived. There was also a short, high-pitched scream. Nobody could be certain it came from Surinder's home, as she lived in a block of terrace houses, and it was possible it could have come from one of the near neighbors. Nobody decided to investigate the noise. For the next month, the people of Handsworth continued their everyday life. That is, except for Surinder. As the weeks went by and Surinder failed to visit the local stores, one shopkeeper became so concerned he alerted authorities. The police went to search Surinder's home and found the missing woman in her bedroom on the upper floor. Someone had taken her life, possibly with some kind of ligature. Due to the state of her remains, it was clear this had happened a while ago. It seemed likely that she'd been attacked shortly after she was last seen. Footprints were seen in the snow leading from the back gate to the bathroom window. This seems to be how the criminal managed to get into the house, but few details have been released about the case. That includes whether there were footprints leading away anywhere, or if the person responsible exited somewhere where the snow had been cleared. It's also not known if there were any signs of a struggle. Fingerprints were found at the house that couldn't be accounted for, but these clues didn't lead the police any closer to the culprit. The case seemed to go cold. Years later, a review of Surinder's case turned up a new clue that police hoped would lead to answers. DNA evidence had been found at the scene of the crime, and now technology was available to analyze it more closely. Unfortunately, this didn't match the DNA of any current suspects. Rather than helping to solve the case, it seemed like the twist had only made the police go backwards. The DNA also didn't match any currently on record. At first, it seemed like Surinder had been attacked by someone she knew, but now, as DNA ruled out the most obvious suspects, that might not have been the case. The police issued another appeal, this time for an Asian man believed to have been living nearby. He drove a Jaguar XJS car, and the police believed he could help with their investigation. He came forward after the appeal, only to be ruled out by the DNA evidence. More than 27 years after Surinder lost her life, the case is still no closer to being solved. There are far more questions than answers in this case. Something strange seemed to be going on in the lead up to the attack. Windows to her home were broken, and it seemed as though someone had deliberately placed a chair in a position to allow them access. All this could have been something innocent. Surinder could have accidentally locked herself out one day and had to break a window to get in. Or it could have been connected to whatever happened the night that Surinder was attacked. It's possible that new technology like genetic genealogy could help solve this case. But there is likely someone who knows what happened to Surinder and why someone decided to take her life. Anybody with information can contact West Midlands Police via their online live chat at westmidlands.police.uk or call 101. You can also contact Crime Stoppers at 0800 555 111. Number 2. Diane Louise Wolfe was a loving mother and wife who was looking forward to welcoming her new grandchild into the world. But shortly before she was supposed to help her daughter move house, Diane vanished without a trace. More than 20 years have passed since Diane vanished, and the police are still no closer to answers in this mysterious case. It was the morning of January 29, 1999, when Diane was last seen. She was 45 years old and living in Hanover, Pennsylvania with her husband, Merle. Diane worked the third shift at Hanover Foods, packing vegetables into tins. She had worked there for 18 years, and it was at work that she had met Merle many years before. He had been there for her after her first husband passed away, and they began dating a year or so later. They'd been married for about 14 years when Diane vanished into thin air. As far as anybody knew, Diane and Merle had a good relationship. They spent their free time together at tractor shows and flea markets, and were planning to go together to Virginia to help Diane's pregnant daughter move back to Pennsylvania. Merle was the last person to see Diane. He worked an earlier shift than his wife, so was home when she came back a little after 7 a.m. on the day of her disappearance. She had with her a lunchbox and some Avon products she bought from a coworker. These were set on the side of the kitchen. The couple spent about 20 minutes relaxing and chatting before Diane left the house to run some errands. Diane was a creature of habit and stuck to her routines. January 29th was a Friday, which meant that she would be going to the bank to deposit her paycheck at an ATM, then would fill up her gas tank, go to an appointment at a tanning salon, and return home to get some sleep. By the time Merle left for work, Diane hadn't returned home, but it wasn't until she didn't show up for work that evening that anybody realized she was missing. Diane normally took over from her mother, who worked the same machine as her on an earlier shift. She would always be a few minutes early, so when Diane didn't show up and didn't call ahead to explain her absence, her mother began to worry. Merle expected that he would find Diane at home when he returned from work, but there was no sign of her there. Her lunchbox and Avon products were still on the kitchen counter and her car was still missing. It didn't seem like she had come back at all. Diane was reported missing the following day, but the police were not immediately concerned. Still, they were able to piece together some information about Diane's final day. She was caught on camera at the ATM, depositing her check at about 7:30 a.m., but Diane never made it to her tanning appointment. Her credit cards weren't used after she disappeared. A few days later, on the morning of February 2nd, Diane's sister Bonnie made a strange discovery when she arrived at work. Bonnie worked at Weiss Market, and when she pulled into the parking lot before her shift, she found her sister's turquoise 1994 Pontiac Grand Prix. She expected Diane would be waiting there and have an explanation for her disappearance, but there was no sign of her. Another employee informed Bonnie that the car had been there since at least the day before. The car was covered in a light-colored dust, as if it had been driven on a dirt trail or to a quarry. Unfortunately, the case was still being considered a simple missing person case. When the police were informed, they did a basic search before turning the vehicle over to Diane's husband, and no evidence was taken. Diane's phone was found in her car, but her purse was missing. Nothing else was unaccounted for. All Diane's clothes were still at her house, and it didn't seem as if she had planned some trip. Diane's family searched the woodland surrounding the market, but found nothing that could explain what had happened to their missing loved one. As time went on, the investigation into Diane's disappearance continued, and police began to believe that there was more to this than a voluntary disappearance. Merle claimed there were no problems in his relationship with Diane, but Diane had been having extramarital affairs. These affairs were with other co-workers, and the police focused their attention on these people. At least one of the men Diane had been involved with was married. The wife had heard rumors of the affair and had allegedly told a friend that if what she found out was true, well, then she nodded towards a weapon she carried. One couple had allegedly threatened her, and Diane had been forced to change her phone number because she received harassing phone calls from a female coworker. It's not clear if these incidents were all related or if multiple people were apparently upset at Diane. The couple that had allegedly threatened Diane had moved out west before the disappearance and seemed unlikely to be responsible for the disappearance. Diane's other coworkers and husband were also cleared. The police found an interesting item on Diane's nightstand. It was a hotel door card with a phone number handwritten on it. After tracing the phone number, they found it belonged to a man living in Maryland. He claimed it was connected to a fax machine that he no longer used, and had no idea who Diane was or why she had the number. Years later, police retraced this man who is now living in New York. His story was the same. According to a local newspaper, investigators wanted to re-interview him, but he got a lawyer and left the area. Diane's family wanted to hold on to hope that she was still alive, but that possibility didn't make much sense. She was looking forward to welcoming her grandchild into the family, and had even been organizing the baby shower for her daughter. Even if, for some reason, she decided she wanted to leave Merle, they didn't believe she would have abandoned the rest of her family. It seemed likely that someone had made Diane disappear the day she vanished. It's possible that they used her car to get rid of her body, but because the car was never processed by the police, it's impossible to say for certain. Even if there were no fingerprints or DNA evidence, the dust could have at least pointed police towards the location of her body, but sadly this didn't happen. In the years after Diane's disappearance, there were many rumors about what had happened to her that were shared by workers at Hanover Foods. There hasn't been any evidence to substantiate these rumors, but it seems likely that someone in the area, or someone who once lived in the area, knows what happened to Diane. Diane is described as being 5'6" and weighing 180 pounds. She had brown hair and brown eyes, a scar on her abdomen, and a purple rose tattoo on her left ankle. Anyone with information about the case is asked to contact the Pennsylvania State Police, Gettysburg, at 717-334-8111. Number 1. What should have been a celebration turned into a tragedy when Craig Malin lost his life at a bachelor party in Spain in 2012. The people responsible have never been identified, but a new witness revealed 10 years after the incident could be the missing link to put the clues together. Craig was an outgoing and friendly engineer from Lanarkshire, Scotland. He was only 26 years old but had a successful start to his career and moved to Australia when his company offered him a new position as a quantity surveyor overseas. So the trip in May of 2013 had two benefits. He would get to see his family again after spending time on the other side of the world, and he would celebrate his brother's upcoming marriage. Craig arrived in Scotland on May 18th after a long flight over from Australia. He had a few hours to spend with his parents, Ian and Antoinette, before getting on another plane, this time to Spain, with his brothers and friends. Craig and 8 others arrived in Lloret de Mar that afternoon. It was a popular vacation destination and filled with young tourists from the UK and other parts of Europe. The men checked into their hotel and then headed out to enjoy themselves. The hotel was located in an area where there were plenty of bars. It was already very busy by the time the group set out, and they were turned away from a few places just because there were too many people there. The group eventually ended up at a Rockefeller's disco bar. Like a lot of groups on bachelor parties, the men in Craig's group were all wearing matching shirts. These were black with bright green writing on the front and back, making them all very recognizable. At Rockefeller's, the vacation got off to a great start. Craig and his friends were enjoying themselves, drinking and dancing. As Craig was very outgoing, it surprised no one when he quickly made friends with other groups who were vacationing in the area. One of these was a group of women from Bristol who danced with Craig and his friends late into the night and the early hours of the following morning. At some point in the evening, some of the group decided to head to the hotel as they had reached their drinking limit. Craig and 3 others stayed behind until the bar closed at 6 a.m. According to those at the bar, including the door staff, the group hadn't been any problem at all inside. All the clubs in the area closed at the same time, so there were many people spilling onto the street as Craig and his friends left the bar. It's estimated that there were about 60 people in total in a very small area. What exactly happened next isn't clear. All the people involved had been drinking, but at about 6:20 a.m., a group of men approached Craig and his friends. A conversation started and someone hit Craig on the side of the head. Craig was described as a peacemaker by his friends. When an argument would break out, he was the one to calm things down. So why someone had decided to hit him remains a mystery. According to the police, it was an unprovoked attack. Craig fell to the ground and his friends began to fight with the couple of men that had attacked him. A Spanish-speaking woman with blonde hair cradled Craig and tried to revive him, but he didn't wake up. The police were called, but the group of men fled the scene. A lot of other witnesses also left, including the woman who had helped Craig as he passed away. She's never been identified. Early in the police investigation, investigators identified one group of men they wanted to speak to. 4 French tourists who had been staying in the area checked out of their hotel early and left the country immediately after the altercation. It's not certain that these people were responsible though, but the police would like to speak to them anyway. They've never come forward to identify themselves. One of the reasons why this group was so interesting is because it's known that there was a group of 4 Frenchmen in the area at the time of the attack. Their car had been towed from a nearby street, and the group had gone to the police station to deal with the issue. They were caught on CCTV at 6:40 a.m. They would have had to have walked through the crowd of people to get to the police station. It's possible they'd been part of that crowd, leaving the bar, had the altercation with Craig and his friends, and had gone to get their car, only to realize it had been towed. Whether or not these men had anything to do with the incident, investigators would still like to speak to them. If they themselves were not involved, they might have seen or heard something that could help solve the case. Craig's family have appealed multiple times for information. Sadly, his mother Antoinette passed away due to cancer, exactly 6 years after Craig lost his life. His father Ian has suffered multiple health issues, but hopes that he can get answers in this case before he passes away. Some of the people who spoke with Craig that night have come forward, including the group from Bristol, but many more have never spoken to the police. Craig's family and detectives have urged anyone who was in the area to come forward. It might be that these witnesses didn't even realize how serious the incident was. It's not uncommon for nights out to end in fights, but normally people walk away with nothing much worse than a few bruises. Many witnesses might have thought that that was all that happened and never realized just how significant the incident was. One person who seemed to know something significant had happened was a woman who called the police at the time of the incident. 10 years after Craig passed away, a new twist in the case came when a specialist inquiry team revealed that they were looking for a new witness. The woman called the police at 6:26 a.m. on May 19th to describe a fight. She told the police that one of the men involved was tall, matching a description given by other witnesses. This individual is believed to be around 6'2" and had apparently been flexing his muscles and trying to provoke the group. The investigators believe this woman might have known more information that could be helpful in the inquiry. The only thing they know about her, though, is that she speaks English. She may have told others about the incident, though, and police hope that someone might be able to identify her. This is a case that is definitely solvable. In fact, a private investigator, hired by the company Craig worked for, believes he knows the identity of the individuals responsible. But catching the criminals will require the right person with the right information to come forward. Anyone with information on this case can contact investigators at info@craigmalin.com. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.